is quite inspiring because I could remember the first time he made the transition and he was so joyful. And then, the reality of it hits that look, if I have to put myself into this, it's going to be very tasking. But one thing I recommend him for is his courage and his ability to transition and fitting perfectly well. So he's going to be talking to you guys as to how he transitioned from 9 to 5 to contracting. And I hope that will inspire you all. So please, give a round of applause for Mekoma.
Hello, everyone. Hello. I'm just going to test that real quick to make sure it works. Yes, it does. Hi, for anyone who's not met me, most of you call me Toby. Officially, I'm known as Shedrack. So, I think that is actually my second name, which I really use. Now, the rest of the world know me as a senior project manager or delivery manager, depending on where you come from. My business knows me as the director. I am self-employed, take care of myself, and I don't rely on anybody. Yeah, since. Now, before we go into this story, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a snippet of where I came from and how we are going to go into this journey. Now, previously, I spent about 10 years of my professional career working for one company. Can't really name them. It's not a fault. I sat around. And in those 10 years, I progressed through the ladder and I thought I was doing really well. Was aiming for a directorship, was spinning late, had a really small team, so life was easy. Had less than 5 people on one team, didn't have to stress. Turn up every day, you go to work, you're safe. And then something happened. Something personal within the business happened, which got me really thinking, I really need to move on from this business. But in that same moment, it was about how can I move on? I've worked my entire life. I've been a corporate guy. Where am I going to go? Why not find another business and start all over with them, either another team, and do another 10 to 20 years of my life? And a friend of mine who's out here, his name is Jackson, and he goes, just come contracting. I thought, is that just consultancy? No, it's not consultancy. It's different. You work for yourself. I'm like, yeah, but this is stressful. And he's like, no, just do it. Like, you can do it. So I'm like, okay, cool. You know what? Let me have a go on this. Now, this was my story before I got here. Before I became director of a company. Before I had a second persona that the rest of the world knew me as. Now, what did my job become? Actually? And this is where I want you guys to engage in the journey, right? Think of this and try and relate it to where you are right now and what you're feeling. Okay? Well, it was a good job. It was permanent. It meant, I didn't have to worry. I could pay my bills. I was fine every month. I was fine every year. And the company was doing great, so I knew we're not going to go bankrupt. I was very secure because I was needed, so I knew that there was not going to be redundancy. But ultimately, it was a cage. Every time I go to work, if there's any setbacks at the workplace, I come on with that. Because for me, I'm very attached to this role. It's now becoming part of my life. They were no longer just workers to me, they were family. Now, in some sense, that feels like success. In some sense, you feel like, yes, you really done really, really well for yourself. But if you think about it, you find yourself in a position where you forget that you are an employee of business. You start feeling like part of the team, right? Hence why this thing really kind of gets you to that comfortable place where you know you're in a cage, but psychologically you're fine with it. And everything in you starts to say, well, look, do I really need to move? Do I need to kind of, ruffle the feathers? Do I need to unsettle myself? But you're in a cage. And that voice in your head is what we're going to try and get rid of today. Okay? Now, the date there that is very memorable to me is June 2023. That was the day I got my first contract. With a tiny contract, with a company called Good CRM, and it was a part-time contract, 2 days a week. They couldn't afford much, they worked with charities, but I was like, you know what? Only this and the difference, I'll take it. Now, from that point on, things started changing a bit. I went from the notion of being employed by just one business to, for the first time, having multiple sources of income. And it slaps differently. You get paid at the end of the month, and then an invoice comes through a few days later. You don't know what to do with the money, because suddenly now there's multiple incomes. But it's a balancing game, right? Because for the first time, I felt truly secured, and I didn't know how I got there. I felt like if my main source of income got rid of me, I still had a second source of income to rely on in that short term until I figure it out. You know, and that was the big shift in my head. It was in the last 10 years of my life, without realizing it, I had been the most vulnerable as a person. If my employer terminated my contract due to redundancy, due to the company struggling, due to a new senior leadership team that didn't like me, I'm at the wall. I have no turn to. And for a lot of people right now, especially, it has happened to them. Most people here can relate to someone who's been recently made redundant, who's recently lost a job, or who's recently kind of been given a notice at work as a minor part of redundancy. They didn't see it coming. And now for a lot of people, it's like, well, where do you start from? This has been my family. This is where I've worked. So, you know, what do I do next? I'm not nurtured any relationships steadily. I don't have any other company to turn to. So I'm going to have to, figure it out. You don't realize you're vulnerable until you're in that position. Now, you really have to start thinking about the life in general. Employment is one job. Right. Or what's restricting you to one job? That's your choice. Every day you wake up, you get ready, you go to work. That's your choice. You also have the ability to make another choice, which is to go from one source to multiple sources. I call them clients because that's what they are. You have a good relationship. I deliver for you, you pay me. If you want to go elsewhere, you have a freedom to. If I want to go elsewhere, I have a freedom to. And we understand that mutually. So when I wake up every day, I know a client can decide we want to change our strategy, we're going to end our contract with you. And that's fine. That's why I signed up. Now, I'm not going to talk about financial rewards in this conversation today, and that's intentional because I don't want people thinking about the money. I want you thinking about where you are. I want you thinking about how vulnerable you are in your current situation. How having one source of income is the biggest ticking bomb you're sitting on, and you don't think about it. You had a paycheck, so you think you're comfortable. But really, I'll ask you this question. If you do not get paid at the end of next month, what's the situation going to be like? Okay? But this is the bit that caught me off guard. And, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about this. I've been there for 10 years, and psychologically, I felt really good. I felt like I was really good at my job. I knew what I was doing. I could do it with my eyes closed. The team were familiar with me. I was very familiar with them. But I was actually caught in a trap. Not in a cage. This is different. I was caught in this little loop of not developing myself to my potential, right? He had obviously the usual reviews every year. You know, you went through that with a little development program, which kind of fits into the box of where you're working in. And you think, okay, you're developing in, but the truth is you're acting very restricted. For 10 years, I was literally repeating the same thing. And you kind of sit there and you think, Holden, how much have you grown in those 10 years? As a person, I've grown. But technically, my exposure has been limited because I'm in one company, doing one job, and just moving up the ladder. It's not something new. And a very relatable way to think about this is when you get a promotion, when you turn up at work the next day, do you feel different? Not really. You got a new job title, you might get a little bit more pay, or do you now suddenly have to develop a whole new set of these skill sets? Answer is no. Why is that? It's called LinkedIn experience. You already know what LinkedIn did, and all you need to do is maybe add 2% of a review to what you do daily. And that's how you fulfill your role. Right. But it's a little trap. Don't try and break out of that trap. Right? Contracting has the ability to smash that trap. So think about the data I showed you earlier on. 2023 is when I started contracting. So that's exactly 3 years from now. And why do I know it's 3 years from now? Because my accountant called me to send just my 10 years income. That's how I'll get to you. But I have that flexibility now. In 3 years, I have gone from working with one company to working with 8 major companies. They're all distinctively different. Right. You know that whole myth of you need to stay within your industry, you know, when you're reapplying, find a job that you've got the experience for. It's not true. The reason it's not true is you have the skill set. And skill sets applied in so many different areas. Now, if you're in the corporate one, it's even easier. It's harder if you're like in jobs that are not corporate, where like, okay, if you're like an electrician, you can't really go from being that to being a plumber. You need to go matrix. But if you're a manager in, let's say, Tesco's, you can easily go from being a manager in Tesco's to being a manager in this building. Similar skill sets. You're organized. You're proactive. And more importantly, you're courageous enough to think outside the box. So it's very transferable. Now, some names that are very recognizable. If you look at like Virgin Media or too, they're massive. Yes, it's true. But then you look at some names, they're like, I don't recognize the names. The Bank Group. Who's that? No one knows that. But you know the brands they represent. You just don't know that. The Bank Group represents Roosevelt's Casino, Mecca Bingo. But what do they all need? They need people who have skill sets. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. It doesn't matter what you're doing. They need someone who has the skill sets of 1, being organized, 2, being adventurous, and 3, more importantly, being confident enough to say, I can fulfill that contract for you. Take a chance on me. And literally, that's what you do. You go knock on the door and you say to them, I can deliver for you. And it just feels to repeat. Now, every sector you go into, there's going to be a difference because they work differently. That's fine. You learn. In the space of 3 years, I have learned more than I did in 10 years of my life. And what did I change? I stopped thinking about one employer. I became my own employer. We work on our terms. If you don't, and if we can't get to a middle ground, I'm sorry, or I have to terminate our contract. Gives you the freedom to think. You suddenly stop thinking and stop feeling vulnerable about your situation, and you start realizing the entire UK, the entire Europe, America, you name it, Germany, Asia, go for it. It's all one big market. It's really that simple. And you are the product. You know, that's like such a cliche phrase to use. You are the product. But you aren't. You're the first of the product was. You're who the senior leadership team want to talk to. You're who, if you're a developer, you're who they want to craft that piece of code. If you're a tester, you're who they need to test that piece of item. If you're an admin, you're who they need to organize everyone's lives. There's so many roles that are possible within contracting. And something that contracting really taught me is that progression is a myth. And why is it a myth? Well, most people strive to become directors, but they never know why they strive to be directors. And you say to them, why do you want to be a director? It's like, wow, that's the pinnacle of things, you know? I become a director, I'm made, you know, I can relax, I can retire. But what if I said to you, I know junior program managers that earn more than directors in several countries. They just don't have the talency tag on the director. But they earn significantly more. They have bigger teams, they have bigger responsibilities, and they have bigger budgets as well. So when you step away from the conventional way of thinking of progression, and you start thinking of, I have 10 to 15 years of my life where I want to work really hard and I want to maximize the output of that, you have indirectly become a business in yourself. Every year you review how you're doing. Every year you sit down and think how much you made this year. You give yourself that ability. For someone who's employed, well, okay, you can get a pay rise, maybe 5-6% every year. Go over an additional 100 quid, 200 quid a month. If you're a contractor, you can triple your income. I mean, literally triple your income. It's all down to you and how hard you want to work. Your business. If you work hard enough, you earn more. If you want to relax, you earn less. You control it. All right? As I said, it's very, very, very possible. Now, I'm not telling you guys how in this slide, and that's intentional. Just today's conversation is to let you know that these things are achievable. Now, for anyone who wants to know how, I need more than 20 minutes to walk you through that. Right? That's achievable. Sure. Now, the first J, right? And this is the piece where when I was compiling the slides, I really froze when I looked at it, because I've not looked at my CV in a long time. And I was like, yeah, this happened. And this was my first meeting. So I had gone from my little team of 5 people that I could do it my way with. People need to do reviews and stuff like this. We know what to do, to handling a project which was rolling out to 3 major countries. Now, countries are completely different ideologies. You've got Germans who are a bit more aggressive when you're talking to them. You've got the Americans who kind of like think everything is possible. And then you got people in Japan who are just so laid back that you're like, man, come on, I need this work doing. You know, yeah, we get you. It's fine. And that was my job. It was literally like being thrown in the deep sea side of things. Like you're right in the deepest end. But in a weird way, it didn't feel like that. Because it was exactly the same skill sets that I used to work with 5 people that I needed to work with the other 3 people across 3 different countries. So you're like, yeah, you're basically, look, you're not ready to do a contract. And you're thinking, I I need to get 20 years of experience under my belt. I need to be at the peak form. I need to be so senior in life. And it's like my gray hair's showing. So like, you know what? They take me serious.
Nailed it.
It's true. Believe it or not, you're already at the point where you can contract. Now, not everyone needs to go straight into a singing role. There are junior roles for people who are like, okay, let me start at school. You get a junior role, you get a decent day rate. You work it out, you're taking them good money. You spread it around, you get a few clients, you're good. But you jump for some people, it's deeper. But only deeper when you're telling the story. As the person who went through it, it wasn't deep. There were days in which I was in just 4 hours of work. Literally. You would think I'm working 20 hours a day. No, 4 hours of work is done. The day in my day rate. That's it. You know, my wife thinks I'm lazy. Like, done what's needed. But you really have to understand that the hardest part is actually getting through the door. Once you're through the door, you realize it's not as mysterious as it seems. They're just people like you. They're friendly and they're laid back. There's some difficult characters to work with, but then you have that permanent role as well. Right? Now, the phrase at the bottom there is something that I always say this to my leadership teams that work for me, and I say to them, what I want from you the most is to refine your judgment. Because the reality is, everything else you can handle. But your judgment is what makes the key difference. How you look at an issue, how you think about something, how you approach a person. But believe it or not, you already have that skill. No one needs to teach you that because you've been doing that all your life. You did that through college, you did that through uni, you did that at your first job, be it at, Marks and Spencer's and McDonald's. You looked at a customer and you thought, okay, I'm a bit nicer to you because, you know what, I think your tough cookies back. And it's exactly the same skill set in a corporate world. Even as a director, it's exactly the same skill set. You look at something, you think about it, and you make a judgment. Why do I come back to that point? It's to highlight to you guys that you're readier than you believe you are. The only thing stopping you is the doubt. Is that idea in your mind that it'll be too deep a drop. I won't be able to hack it. I might lose my contract. I might be out on the streets. Like I said, the reality is, well, you're already exposed right now if you're employed. We're just going to be doing this deal, eh? So, offer me that. Right. Now, you're not starting from zero. You get everything already, as I say. If it's a McDonald's job, you're trained up already. You know? If you had your first professional job, you're trained up already. If you've never had a job where you've been in uni and you've actually worked in like some kind of collaborative setting where you got with some authority, you're halfway there. Contracting doesn't need you to have a decade of experience behind you. I've worked with people who've only had 2 years of experience. And they've been greater than people that have about 10 years of experience. One, they've learned to refine their judgments. They've learned to be proactive, they've learned to be team players, and they've learned to be willing to learn. You're willing to learn, you can learn any role in less than 6 months. You can learn to be a director of a company in less than 6 months. And that's the crazy bit. You can learn to be Elon Musk in less than 6 months if you're given an opportunity. It's learning. And after 6 months, you wake up every day and it's normal. You know what you're doing already. You know who you're doing already. You know how they work. As I said, the hardest part is getting through the door. Right? It's a transition. You're going from A to B. You're going from sitting and taking time box to getting a bit more control of your life. Yeah, control of your future. That's what contracting essentially gives you. It's the ability to realize that it's okay to not be secure. Because why? You're building relationships with recruiters. You're building relationships with on you're working on. So when those relationships come back, they're call someday. So look, you worked together last year, we've got this project coming. You want to join in? You're no longer scared of not being in a secured permanent role. Okay. Now, to kind of close off today, right? I want you to kind of just open up your mind, like, and just think about this. Stop thinking about that phrase in your head of what if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if I crash and burn? Well, there's another part of that coin, and there are people who live in that part of the coin, which is what if it works out? What if I make a success of this journey? What if I crack it? I go from 0 to where I want to be much quicker. I expand my world much quicker. I expand my knowledge. I expand my experiences. And that's the question we need to ask yourself. Stop asking yourself, what if it doesn't work out? And say to yourself, what if it works out? Because the days you're struggling, and you will struggle as a contractor, I can guarantee you that, you still have to remember that it has a really, really good chance of working out. And eventually it does. All the contractors I know, they still contract. That's just a simple truth. Right? Really, take that step. I took it. I really love it. And as Luminous said, I really pushed. It took me a while. It's not something that happens instantly. It took me 7 months of searching to get my first tiny contract. And then another 9 months. But actually, no. 9 months in total from when I started searching. I got my first major contract. But 7 months from my first little. And that's a lot of time. Yeah, think about it. You're applying to clients for 6-7 months. You're not getting anything. We're presenting the clients your skill sets, and they're like, sorry, no, not you. You're getting rejected over and over again. And that's a common experience. It's not a quick magic trick. You're not going to start today and next week you're in a contract. Some people get lucky. Don't get me wrong. Some people get lucky and get a contract in 2 to 3 months. But I never will also stayed longer than 9 months to transition in. But once you're through the door, as I said, everything else you came to the same. So you have to really motivate your mind if you're going to go on this journey that you will get rejected a lot. At some point you're going to wake up and you're going to feel like, what's not good about me? Am I missing a leg? You will ask those questions because you will get rejections. That email you get where they're like, we went with someone else because they were more suited to this contract. You will get loads of that. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, I am glad I made that switch. I am glad I made that transition. And if you said to me today, you have to do it all over again, I'd be like, yeah. Reject me as many times as you want. One client's going to pick me up something yet. And that's going to make it work. Okay? As I leave you with this notion in your mind, always think about this. What if it does work out? If you would leave that service, see you there. As I said, if you want to speak to me after this, please do keep it gladly. I'll be around and we can talk more about how the transition was. So on that note, I'm going to hand this back over to
Thank
Vinny.
you.
And actually, one more thing before I just This is for Luna specifically, right? So I've known Luna for a long time, and he said to me, "Look, I've got this idea. I want to tell people stories, and I want you to enjoy it." Initially, I was like, "What are you on about? I want to tell stories. I'm not biased." But he's like, "Look, just tell them your story. Don't think too much about it. Just be out there." And I was like, "What's your goal with this platform?" And he's like, "Think about a TED Talk, right? You sit there and you listen to this fire of people all the way in America, in Australia, Canada, all around the world, and they give you this story about their lives, but you can't relate to it because in your mind, it's far off. In your mind, you're in the UK, it might be in a tiny village somewhere, it might be the city, which, is still nothing compared to New York, it's nothing compared to Shanghai and such places." And he says, look, he wants to bring this story our way. Let's have it with our communities. Let's tell our stories. Let's mingle with people who can relate to us, who can reach out to us. And ultimately, let's let people understand that it is achievable. So I want to say thanks to Lumen for setting this up and giving me a chance to actually tell my story to you. So Lumen, thank you.